Okay, now we're sitting down with Brenda in her office. She was kind enough to sit down with us, and we've been visiting for a while, so I'm going to try and revisit some of the things that she's told me. There's so much interesting to know that, of course, we can't possibly hit on even if we were to sit down for a few hours. But we're going to try and hit just some basic things that everybody should know about pregnancy centers in general, but also this particular Pregnancy Resource Center. And so one of the things that we were talking about is that this particular center is not tied to a network, but this is its own standalone center. So what are some of the pros and cons that come with being a standalone center?
Well, I can tell you that there are some of each.
Sure.
But some of the pros, the reason we chose to become a standalone center was to benefit the people, the clients that we serve. We were born out of First Christian Church in 1990. And it was the vision of two women. We were just starting to see the ramifications of Roe versus Wade and all the abortion and all the drama and the trauma.
You said this was when? Sorry.
We started in 1990.
Really? Okay. And Roe v. Wade was the 70s, wasn't it?
1973.
Yeah. Okay. So Roe v. Wade had already been instituted, but
Yes.
25 years later, the implications of that were coming to be understood more fully.
We were starting to see all the problems that came with it. So being part of a church does give you some wonderful affirmations that you have that support system automatically built in. And I'm sure for the gals who decided to take this into their own 501c3, it was probably some pretty scary time, because you no longer have that support system. You don't have the financial system. You're a standalone entity. And we don't have that kind of network that we can go to and say, hey, we need some funding. You know, for the organizations that are tied into the Catholic organizations, they are very strongly and well funded. Same thing with the Baptist organizations, that they get extra funds, whereas we do it all on our own. I shouldn't say it like that. God provides.
Of course.
He provides. We don't do it on our own, but He gives us the means to do it. So we are totally donation based, and the funds that we get come from people that just have a heart for what we're doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't long ago the state of Oklahoma did enact a program that they were offering to some pregnancy centers, and they were trying to get it implemented across the state, where some funds had become available through the state to help with the operational costs and with the costs. And we looked at it. I have a wonderful board of directors full of 7 amazing people. And we looked at it and decided that that wasn't right for us, because it was limiting our ability to talk to them about Christ. If I wanted to enact their program, we had to separate it from our educational component. So the person, their mentor, who is building that relationship with them, could not talk to them about Christ. And we just made a decision. We don't need that money.
Right.
We will find the money in other places.
Yeah.
And God's provision has been so great. So we don't take any state funding or federal funding. I do write grants when I can, if I can find some, that will fit our needs.
Sure.
But everything else is from the good and kind hearts of people.
Yeah.
And some churches who will partner with us on our baby bottle drives, and we actually have a couple churches that we're a line item on their missions budget.
Yeah.
Which we totally appreciate.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't give us a whole lot, but it gives us something stable to count on.
Right.
It's hard to render a budget when you don't know how much you have to work with.
Right. Yeah.
I start the budget process at the fourth quarter of every year, and basically it's just a recommendation, because I don't know what God's going to do. We used to have fundraising events. With COVID, we don't do those, or we haven't been up until that. Until we still haven't planned one for this year. But it's really been kind of incredible to see God's provision through it all. That maybe I was trying to depend on me too much, and not letting God do enough of the work.
Yeah, that's been a humbling thing that I identify with totally in ministry as well. There's so many ways in which I feel like I've been gifted and that things are good because of me, and then that falls apart and things still work out, and well, it wasn't necessarily me the whole time. So
it wasn't me. It wasn't what we were doing.
Yeah, but I mean, it is also clear that you run a good ship here as we look around. So this was born out of a church. It has some ministries that you've really had to build on your own rather than have handed to you by a larger structure.
Right.
We were talking about some figures before we started turning the cameras on, one of which being that we do have prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned. Well, and even still, I don't know, federal money going to abortion clinics, and those have been undergirded and funded by the federal government in large part. Meanwhile, we've had pregnancy centers. We were looking up stats on the way over here. In 2017, there were 2,700 pregnancy centers around the United States. Now it's estimated there's closer to 3,000. And those, by and large, are not at all, have no federal incentive money whatsoever, are provided by what is obviously Christians who are putting their faith into action. People who not only say that unborn life is worthy of the same thing as born life, but want to use what gifts and graces God has given them to support resource centers that are a blessing to expectant mothers and children in disadvantaged scenarios. So you are funded by believers and churches that practice what they preach.
Right.
And because of that, let's talk about what financially happens when a young mother comes in here and is seeking your services. How much of their own money are they spending to have access to your services? At what points are they expected to put in some of their own money? And then how much is free and offered because of the funding and blessing that you've received?
Everything we do is free. The clients are not expected to provide any kind of funding whatsoever. People don't realize how much it costs us to operate. Just as an example, for a woman who comes in for a pregnancy test, if it's positive, we automatically do STD testing. These are all things that we are paying for. The ultrasound machine, and there's a sanitizing machine that I have to put the probes through. It costs me a minimum, and this is not even including, staff salaries, but it costs me a minimum of $100 to service a woman for just a pregnancy test and 2 STD tests. We test for chlamydia and gonorrhea and that limited ultrasound. Mm-hmm. If you started figuring in all the overhead on how much it costs for rent and air conditioning and all that, I think those numbers would be probably quite a bit even higher. But it makes a difference. But it's part of our mission is we will do everything for free.
Yeah.
We don't want them to have to pay for anything. We do ask for when they enter our educational program, we ask for their commitment and their time to spend their time with their mentors. Mm-hmm. And for some, that's even asking too much. But some are really happy and willing to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about, I want to talk about generational poverty broadly, and then I want to talk about the role of males in this. But I've been praying about and learning about generational poverty since, as a pastor, a lot of people come to the church and say, I need money, would you give me money? And as pastors, we're in an interesting place because, or churches, we have money that people want to go to people in need. However, we're not the money people, we're the Jesus people. And so when people come to us seeking blessing or respite or care, then we want to give them what resources we have, but we also want to equip them with a life-saving relationship with Christ Jesus, and then practically with the tools so that they're not in this situation on down the line, because so many people go from crisis to crisis. They have dysfunctional relationships with God, with others, with themselves. Daily they wake up and are surrounded by brokenness, and they're just trying to function in the midst of dysfunction. And a lot of people that find themselves in the midst of an unexpected and unwelcome pregnancy are people that fit this bill. They were raised by parents that were dysfunctional, caught in generational poverty. They haven't been equipped emotionally or spiritually to deal with adversity. And so you've got people, all of us are born broken, but some of us have persisted in brokenness. And they enter into these doors and they receive an invitation towards wholeness, particularly in Christ Jesus, but in a number of other very practical ways. So you match them up with these volunteers that seek to bring out the best in them and teach them new things and equip them for handling adversity better than they have in the past. And then what kind of roadblocks do you run into frequently? Every person is different and they're going to have unique circumstances, but if your ministry is like mine, you run into a lot of the same things over and over and over, in which Satan puts roadblocks between you and, well, really between them and Jesus. So So what are some of those particular things that you notice that people who are watching this can pray against?
Apathy.
Apathy.
Apathy. Some people just don't want to apply themselves. They don't care. And, it's funny that only Jesus can teach us how valuable we are. We're valuable to him. He loves us regardless of our cost and of what we've done. And you try to teach people about forgiveness and that they have choices that they can make and to make different value choices. And when they don't do it, I just kind of think of the word apathy, because the old adage, you can give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, but teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime.
Yeah.
But some people choose not to learn how to fish. And that, I think, is one of the biggest barriers that I guess maybe back to that generational poverty. They think they can't. They don't want to, even when all the pieces are in place for them to learn how to. So that's been one of the biggest barriers. And then if you're thinking of more practical type barriers, transportation issues, trying to get them here to even come shop.
So that's been a frequent...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, if they don't have transportation or they don't have gas. Now, I have been partnered with several churches that I can call and say, hey, I really need some gas cards. Can you help me with, $40-50 in gas cards? And I'll give them out sparingly to people who really have that need. That unfortunately, it comes to that decision, but I might have to pick who I think is.
Yeah, and it's not a lot of the time. If we have a lot of overlap, it's not deciding who's the worthy poor and who's not worthy. It's who really wants to work with us and who really doesn't. Because if we're continually pouring out our resources on those who just are not open, just not receptive, that comes at the expense of those who are open and receptive. And we can't judge people's hearts, but we can judge who's putting effort in and who's not. That's another word for that is discernment. So that's what we're put here to do, is to do good with the limited resources that we have.
We don't want to enable. We want to grow them.
Yeah, so that division between enabling someone who's caught up in dysfunctional, unhealthy ways of life and then subsidizing them to perpetuate that versus equipping someone, allowing them to sit in that discomfort so that there's an opportunity for transformation and change. There's not just an invitation from your end, but there's an adoption on their end of, okay, I obviously don't know what I'm doing in every single way. Perhaps I can try something new, and I can trust these ladies and men that are inviting me in a different stage of my life or a different way of being in the world. And that does happen sometimes. We turn on the TV and we see all these people that won't change, and the battle lines have been drawn, and they're just digging in their heels more and more. But normal people in the world are changing their minds all the time and being persuaded all the time. And you turn on the TV and you've got a caricature of judgmental Christians that just want to shame people and they want to legislate their faith on everybody. But then you get to actually know some real Christians, and they're loving people who do not want to judge. They want to invite. We know we were born in sin. We're not saved because we're worthy. We're saved because Christ is worthy. And there is no sinner who's so far gone that they cannot receive salvation. And we're desperate to share that with people and keep them from harming themselves in the meantime. And
their children. Yes, their children.
And that's, where the rubber really hits the road. My hard heart can sometimes come to terms with, fine, a middle-aged person wants to ruin their life. That's their prerogative. This is America, whatever. But when we're looking at a new generation being brought up that we're going to be caring for, that we're all connected and we impact one another, we affect one another, I can't be ambivalent about that. And then to watch other people be indifferent to their own suffering and the suffering of their children, it's very dehumanizing. And to just, yes, there's a role for a gentle invitation, but sometimes we need to be bold. We need to be very clear. We need everybody to see and hear it doesn't have to be this way.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about men and women, because there are a lot of people who would look at a pregnancy center and say, this has nothing to do with men. This is all a women's issue. There is a historical lens a lot of people look at human history with as men versus women. Men have been trying to control and dominate women this whole time. Women have just been trying to care for themselves and their kids. Women, even nowadays, men are trying to legislate their bodies and trying to control what they can and cannot do. There's another worldview, which is that men and women have been cooperating with each other against nature and Satan for all of human history. And yes, bad things have happened and there have been unhealthy social norms, but men and women are connected. And when women are doing poorly, so are men. When men are doing poorly, so are women. And we need to minister. If we want a flourishing society, we need to minister not just to women and not just to men, but both cooperatively, so we can teach men and women to work well together, not just out in public, but privately in their own homes. And so you have male volunteers. You've already showed us the rooms where these male volunteers come and meet with the men who are expecting fatherhood,
Right.
and equipping these men spiritually, but also practically, and equipping them in their values and virtues. Of course, you're not at the head of seeing these, you have men in charge of this, but as you're watching this from a woman's perspective, what are you seeing happen in the lives of these men?
For the men that have gone through the program, it's almost like you can see the light bulb come on, that they are starting to assume the role, the biblical role that they should have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not all of these men are going to be married to the woman. Not all of them are even going to be in the relationship, continuing with that person who is pregnant. But they do see the role of how important it is to be a father. Mm-hmm. And, we have the best father of all. And he designed the family very specifically for the man to be the head of the household and to love his wife, and then for the wife to, carry on with the children. And we feel like that has been missing from our society for so long. Mm-hmm. We have so many latchkey kids, single parent homes, that we need to get back to some of the basics.
Yeah.
And that's just such an important part. So our gentlemen who provide our mentoring program, they're phenomenal at just building the relationships with these men, and it doesn't end just when the program ends. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have one gentleman who only knew this young man in a virtual visit for over a year. The young man moved away. Here, 2 years down the road, later, they've had another baby. He still calls his mentor to talk to him and says, "Hey, thank you so much for what you taught me." We're planting seeds, but we also sometimes get to see them grow.
Right.
And it's all worth it.
Yeah.
And I wish every relationship turned out that good. They don't all.
No, there's well, and it's, at least from where I'm sitting, it's a minority. It's a minority of bids for relationship that are actually answered well. But it's not a numbers game we're invested in. It's a faith. We're just called to be faithful, regardless of how effective it is. But thanks be to God, these ministries are effective in a number of ways at a number of times. To be clear for anyone watching this who doesn't come from a faith background, as soon as they hear the phrase, the man is the head of the household, there are all these defense mechanisms that activate for someone who's been raised in that other worldview. They're not necessarily familiar with Scripture, particularly Ephesians, where it teaches that even, yes, a man is the head of the household, but he's the kind of head that Christ Jesus is, who pours his life out for those who are under his headship, who serves and sacrifices for the flourishing and the sake of those who are in his household, and that's us. So when Christ models fatherhood, brotherhood that way, then men, that's how we model our headship, is we also pour ourselves out. And there are a lot of men who come in here, I'm sure, who've been taught that life is about them and doing what they want and feels good to them. That's why they're having sex outside of marriage. And then they enter in this place where it's, no, life is about serving your Father and glorifying him and obeying his commands, and then serving those that are in your realm as Christ has served you on the cross. So for men to learn that life is not about them, but it's for these women that they have impregnated, and it's about these children that they have created with this woman, is something that you're not really going to hear when you're turning on the TV or going to school. I don't know that there's many places that teach that other than places like this and in the church.
We do try to take an approach that we kind of enter these conversations carefully. Mm-hmm. I tell new volunteers as we're training them, remember, Jesus didn't hit people over the head with the scroll. Mm-hmm. He entered relationship first, mm-hmm. and then grew with them and talked with them. And so we try to do the same thing. Sure. People can come to us from any faith base, and if that door gets closed, we're going to let it stay closed till it opens again. Mm-hmm. And
that means you're not going to chase them down.
Right.
You're not going to try and force anything.
No,
yeah.
We're not going to force our beliefs, our opinions.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to love on them and support them, And hopefully they're going to look at us and say, hey, what do you have? Because I want that.
Sure.
You know, we have the joy, we have the peace, we have, you know, we have our issues too. But true Christians living a good walk, we do stand apart from others.
Well, and even if they're not compelled to convert and follow Jesus, I think anything that we do that shows that the caricature they encounter on TV is not true.
Absolutely.
That we actually do believe our faith, we actually do practice what Jesus preached, and that we love them. You know, I have heard a lot of people over the years say, I don't believe what you believe, but I can tell you love me. And that's all Jesus expects of us, I think. Right. You know.
If I can share a little story with you.
Please.
It's kind of a cool story. And this happened many years ago. We were interviewing a CPA firm to help us with our annual bookkeeping records. And so we decided to have a luncheon. And so we had some board members come in and invited this gentleman to come in. But lo and behold, the doorbell rings, and it was a client that we had seen before, and I was actually the nurse that had helped her before. And I know that she was Wiccan. And she just
You did not just say wicked, you said Wiccan, which is a
religion.
form of witchcraft in
Right.
America, pagan witchcraft.
Right.
Okay.
And she had come to us for something, and honestly, I don't even remember what she had asked us for, but I noticed that she was just shaking, and that's when my nursing skills kicked in, and I'm thinking, what's going on with this girl? And as I continued, I sat her down in a chair and had the opportunity to talk to her. I found out she hadn't eaten in days. And the little bit of food that she did have, that she had given to her first child and to her partner, that she hadn't had anything to eat. Well, here we had just, the staff, this is when we had a fairly large staff, we had just brought all this food. I had cooked like huge pans of pasta to bring in and feed the CPA guys. And the board was sitting back there with the CPA guys as all of my staff started going different directions, gathering diapers, formula, and some of us started gathering food on plates and wrapping them in tinfoil. And the CPA gentleman is looking at the board chairman and is going, what's going on? And the chairman just said, you'll hear about it soon. Just wait. We sent her out with enough food for 3 days probably, just to give them some food to eat and the diapers that they needed. It didn't matter to us what her faith-based was.
Sure.
What mattered the most is she came back. She came to us once in a time of need, and she knew that there was going to be help here, and she came back. Now, she didn't tell us she was hungry until I started probing, but just the fact that Jesus was shown to her that day. And we try to do that every single day with everybody we encounter. We may not always figure out something that they have a special need, but if we can be the heart and hands and the love of Jesus, then that's the most important thing that they absorb. You know, they may never, like I said, come back to our way of thinking or our faith beliefs.
Sure. Yeah.
But we will continue to share Jesus with them.
Yeah, well, there are two, I don't know if we're going to include this in the final version, but there are two visions of what benevolent help should look like. And one comes with an invitation to live differently, an invitation to be governed by an outside entity that's not of the government, not of yourself, but our Father in heaven. And then the other is no pressure at all. Here's just some help without any conditions. And we're at a real impasse as a culture about which is really better to offer, and can one be offered as a general model for everybody. And I'm of the mind that even if somebody has made up their mind they're never going to follow Jesus, it is still better for them to encounter a caring entity that cares to know who they are, that cares to learn about their needs and their children and their life, versus an impersonal federal government program that couldn't care less about them. I just think so many people, we live in an alienated society where people have no close friends and they don't feel like anybody cares for them. And I just think it's better to be put in an uncomfortable situation where you have to let somebody care for you, even if you don't believe what they believe. I just think that's better for all of us. And I thank God for people like you who serve in a hostile context where you know so many people come in here with a caricature of who you are in their head. And when we have federal legislators who hate what you do here, who see places like this as the enemy, that you're not going to be cowed by them, you're not going to be afraid of them. You just love your Lord, and you've been put on a mission to love his people. And that's really all there is to it. It really is that simple. And for people, I have no doubt, you know, I've been with you for an hour and a half now. People are going to come in here, and not just with you, but with all your workers here, see that unconditional, invitational love. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, it's a privilege to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It is our honor to serve. We are humbled to be called here. You know, nobody's here because they're making a whole lot of money.
Right.
You know, my staff doesn't get paid much. But we're here because we have the heart.
Right.
And we want to serve. And this is where he's called us to be.
Yeah.
When I started this job 12 years ago, I never dreamed I'd be sitting in this chair. This wasn't my passion. At least I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
But God had other design for me. As a nurse, and I was working full time as nursing faculty, and I was running other programs. And to give up all of that to come work for a little nonprofit that couldn't even provide me any insurance or anything, it really took a step of faith, and God had to hit me over the head a few times before I did it. I can't look back. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
All right, so there are a number of things that can be said, have been said, that are not true about pregnancy centers, one of which being that these are not medical facilities whatsoever. We already saw some of the medical equipment that you have here, but can you speak to people being concerned that good medical practice is not to be found in pregnancy centers?
Well, and we actually have to function just like a regular medical clinic. We are governed by an obstetrician gynecologist. Now I'm speaking for our center. Other centers might be governed, their medical services, by a different type of physician, but ours is an actual OB-GYN physician, and we have to follow all his orders. We have policies and protocols in place. Nurses are the ones who do the assessments, and we are the ones who take care of the patients. And it's really important to realize that we're not just a fly-by-night, somebody that's wanting to go out and buy dollar store pregnancy tests and bring people in. We have to follow all the standards that are equipped by the state. We have to have a CLIA waiver to say that we can do this kind of wave testing. We have several hundred policies and procedures in place that govern what we do. We have annual meetings with our board, as well as monthly meetings, but where everything has to be reviewed, all our policies. Our medical director has to sign every ultrasound and every chart. Luckily, we're able to do that electronically.
Oh yeah, great.
But he has to view every one of those that we do, so that to make sure that we are providing adequate level of care. Just to train in limited ultrasound costs us an average of about $10,000 for a nurse. And so that's kind of prohibiting, especially when you're running on donation funds.
Right, yeah.
But what's been even more prohibiting is finding the nurse that has the heart to do it. Because nurses can go out and make $40, $50 an hour now, where we can't offer that kind of wage. But if we could we're looking for a nurse now to help me to do these scans. So if we had somebody, it would cost us about an average of $10,000 to get them trained. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot, and we have to maintain that training. We have to maintain doing the scans and the upkeep. A lot of research and a lot of reading that goes along with that, and a lot of reviewing. So it's not as just a walk in, here's a pregnancy test.
Right. Okay.
Type place.
Well, let's talk about this. I think this will be the last thing. Let's talk about how it is that individuals can help you and churches can help you, and of course, a lot of that is financial. I would assume that there are a number of people who just commit to give regularly on top of their tithe to their church directly to you. I would assume there are special things like bottle drives. You've talked about that, where baby bottles are handed out and said bring them back when they're full of cash and coins. And I'm aware of a number of churches that do that. But it's not just about money. So let's talk about money, but also what volunteer resources, other stuff, and then finally prayers, believing in the power of prayer. What prayers should people be saying who've decided that this is something that should be a bigger part of their prayer life? So money, other, prayer.
Well, you hit money first. Obviously, we have to have money to operate. And so we always believe tithing to your church first, and then doing some extra for us if you can. Monthly funds really help us a lot because it does allow us to budget. So if there is a possibility of doing that monthly, we would love for you to go on our website, and there's a place on that page where you can donate and partner with us. You can set up your own account and decide what you want to do. You can start it and stop it at any time. So that obviously is a big one for us.
That was
prcowasso.org.
Okay.
The other things, human resources is the best thing that you can give us, is people. We need people to service these people. The mentor relationship is a long-term relationship. They are dealing with their client till their baby is 6 months old, and these girls are coming to us, and men, when they're just maybe 5-6 weeks pregnant. So it can get tiresome. It can be weary to follow somebody and to feed into them for that extended length of time. So our mentors get tired.
Yeah.
So it would be wonderful to have more people that will come to us and be willing to be trained. There is training program. We're not going to throw anybody out there without walking alongside them to make sure they understand what
they're not going to come in here and, okay, here's your client, and they'll be equipped.
They'll be equipped to do all that work. And even if you can't do it in person, if you will consider doing it virtually, it's pouring into somebody. And that does take something from ourselves too. You have to use some of your time and some of your talents.
Sure.
But we definitely need people to do that. Coming in and helping with the boutique and sort the donations, all of that is totally run by our volunteers. I don't have enough staff to do it. So we have volunteers that come in every day that we're open and just work back there and do that. So that's a huge help. This video, helping us get the word out. Helping us, if you have a marketing talent or a fundraising talent that you want to help for a cause, we could use all of those kind of services.
Great.
So we want to use whatever gift God is leading you to, leading you with. So we want everybody to have a place here.
Great.
As long as they're willing to pour a little time and effort into it, we will do whatever we can to get them here.
Yeah.
So what was the third one?
Prayer.
The most important one. I should have started with that one. I would have to say that spiritual warfare is very deep right now. And just being conscious of that effort. This war over abortion is not over. In fact, it's really kind of just beginning. And I never thought I would be able to say in my lifetime that abortion has gone away. It has for Oklahoma, but how long that will hold, we don't know. But other states are really gearing up and equipping to take the place of what no longer takes place here. So prayer for all of those lost people is the way I'm just going to say it. I know there's so many out there that are convicted they're doing right. But if you could just see one abortion take place and the horrible life that is snuffed out, I don't know how you could even consider that being right.
Yeah, we were talking when the cameras weren't on about just basic facts that everybody should know that they don't. And so we talked about the number of pregnancy centers available. We've talked about how the vast majority of these are not funded by the government, but they are funded and they can provide services for free. Those are good things. The bad things a lot of people don't know about. Since Roe v. Wade became law of the land, there have been over 62 million abortions in this land. And a nation where the current population is 330 million. So this is more lives than the Holocaust, more lives than Holodomor. We've been looking down our noses at other nations that kill their people. Meanwhile, we've been killing our own most defenseless.
Generations.
The black population in America would be twice as big today were it not for Roe v. Wade. More black babies have been exterminated in the womb than we can comprehend.
And people don't realize that it all started with Margaret Sanger choosing.
Eugenicist.
Yes, choosing to delete that race.
Yes.
If people would just go back and do some research.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with life. When we are scheduled to have picketers come to our center. They're hitting some of the centers. And I would just love to be able to say, help me educate you.
Right, yeah.
Let me educate you. Let me show you. But they're not willing to listen. They're just thinking that their rights are taken away.
Yeah. But when you learn about what an abortion procedure entails,
oh my gosh,
when you learn about what biologists themselves say about when a unique human life begins,
moment of conception.
When you learn about all of the ways in which humanity begins long before birth, these are things that people need to know that we need to continue to pray that that people would be open to receive new information, open to change their minds, and that meanwhile God would give people like you the strength to persevere even when you have people picketing outside, that you're trying to save some lives.
I've already got a good plan. We're going to kill them with love. I'll make sure I provide them with water and, just do whatever we can, because they need that love.
Yeah.
Even if they can't show it to us or the people that come in here for our services, we will show it to them.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna close by saying a brief blessing here, and then when we turn the cameras off, I want to pray with you and your staff. So let's do that. Father, I thank you for these godly people that do this godly work here, and I pray that their ministry would be fruitful, and that you would give them the strength and the sustenance that they need to persevere in the midst of great hostility and just the normal challenges of trying to help people that don't necessarily have the interest in being helped. Father, if it weren't for you, none of this ministry would be going on, so we thank you for who you've been, and we just ask that you would help us to return the love and the faithfulness that you've shown to us. We ask these things in Jesus' holy name. Amen.